Her signature is still best in slot, no doubt. I was really considering getting it anyway because my build, for whatever reason, just couldn't fill that last 10% of crit rate. So whenever I used my ult, there was a good to fair chance that I actually wouldn't crit, and that was of course incredibly unsatisfying. But now that I'm using a Pyro Cup instead, I am able to fill up that 10% crit rate, well, almost all of it. So I'm probably not going to bother getting 1000 Blazing Suns anymore. Hello everyone, welcome back. I recently posted a YouTube community post about an interesting observation that I made about different build variations when I'm using something like Mavuika's signature weapon, which of course, for those who are wondering at home, is 1000 Blazing Suns. It did spark a few questions and clarifications, so I figured, why not? Let's put this into a video. But I can already hear what some of y'all are thinking. Hang on, Kate, I thought you said you weren't going to get her signature. What happened? Well, this happened. It was the thought of changing up my build in such a way that I would not need 1000 Blazing Suns. By doing something like this. That's what occurred recently. Alright, first and foremost, what we need to do is we need to figure out what our luck is for today, okay? In the Grand Narukami Shrine, what is our fortune for today, ladies and gentlemen? It is modest fortune. Okay, that's not bad. That's not bad. That's not bad. I'm gonna gun for 1000 Blazing Suns. I have 18 free pulls. Somehow, I don't know how I managed to get that, but I've got 18 pulls just sitting around waiting to be used. They were otherwise going to be used for Miko. They're going to be used for 1000 Blazing Suns. Alright. Let's put our hands together, ladies and gentlemen, and let us pray. Oh Hakushin, cause of this enchantment, in reverence, I perform this rite to be a guiding light. Your unrivaled power will be honored eternally. Give us the 1000 Blazing Suns that we seek. Keep in mind, my pulls are not funded by being a content creator. No. I work full-time. Alright. Let's do this. I think we have no pity. There's no way we have any pity, is there? What was the last thing I even went for? Symphonist of Sense, the second one. Alright, cool. 3, 2, 1, go. Just give me 4 stars, 10 pity, bunch of alley flashes. It's a 50-50. Well, it's no pity. Like, there could be a 50-50. I could also get a standard weapon. We don't know. At 20 pity. Great. Okay, here we go. Let's see what we get. Skyward Harp. Okay. I'm not entirely against another Skyward Harp, not gonna lie. Skyward Harp is unironically a very useful 5-star weapon. There are quite a lot of characters that would love to use a Skyward Harp. So I'm not, like, super salty about that. And now I get a guarantee on friggin' 1000 Blazing Suns. Cool, let's just keep going then. Screw it, let's just go all the way. Okay, we're done. We got all of that constellation out of that. I think we're done. Yeah, we're done. Cool. Awesome. Wow, that was it. I didn't even have to do anything. You know, this entire time I was like umming and ahhing about it because, again, like I said, I can twist my build around in such a way that I kind of don't need 1000 Blazing Suns for the crit rate. But when you get 30 pity, holy hell. When you just get it in 30 pity, I guess there really is no reason to not get it. Come on. Oh, come on. That was... Nah, that's rigged. Oh, god damn it. Okay, I need to go and do this then. Alright, let's go farm this stuff. In the Mavuika reruns video, I kind of just glossed over what 1000 Blazing Suns is, so let's actually go through what this weapon can do for Mavuika's overall DPS. Because it's actually a little different to how I remembered it, actually. First off, it has the highest possible base attack of 741, but it also has, of course, the lowest possible crit rate substat of 11%. Now, using your skill or burst starts an effect that has a 10-second cooldown, but what it gives you is 20% crit damage and 28% attack, both of these effects, of course, lasting for 6 seconds. That being said, though, if you do normal and charge attacks using elemental damage, well, they increase the duration of these effects by 2 seconds, with a maximum of 3 hits needed to increase the duration by up to 6 seconds. If the character has Night Soul, then these buffs actually become 75% stronger. We're talking about 35% crit damage instead, and 49% attack. The duration also won't tick down while the character is off-field if they have Night Soul. So obviously, when you have a character like Mavuika, who has a bike that can do normal and charge attacks that are pyro-infused, have Night Soul, and is also still doing something off-field, well, no kidding, this weapon is of course perfect for her. But I think it's also Kinich mains who have made use of this weapon, even though his gun actually does skill damage, and depending on how you play her, you could potentially use this weapon on someone like the Haya. When we think about how we should build our characters, generally speaking, a more healthy mix of stats is pretty much the way to go. For the most part, you can think of them all as multipliers to your damage, so if you overinvest in one stat at the detriment of others, typically your DPS is going to get lower because the reality is whatever stats you're already multiplying will then get diminished by the lower multipliers. So because the signature weapon gives crit rate, crit damage, and attack, it would stand to reason that other stats like EM and teams that actually use it, for example Vape and Melt, are going to see more value in your build. Obviously, things like certain thresholds before returns start to get reduced will of course exist, but for the most part this is usually the theory behind our build crafting. Now, I'm about to show you a bunch of demonstrations so that we have a better idea of what's going on with my R1 Mavuika. So before we continue, I just want to remind you all to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because your support can always help with the YouTube algorithm. One thing that was brought up in the comments of that YouTube post was the apparent lack of attack buffs coming in for Mavuika. So let's start off by looking at the team that I'll be using in these demonstrations. It is, of course, my favorite Mavuika team, being my Mavuika Vape team. I'm not 100% sure if this is the strongest Vape team you can make. Hexarray Vape might be better, but I hear it's just way too memey to really be considered. R1 Mavuika. I'm going to keep my flower, feather, and cup pretty much the same for these demonstrations, with my sand and my hat being variables. Note the use of the Pyro Cup, because we're also going to be bringing C2 R1 Shillinen on scroll. Now, there is going to be that attack percent coming in for Mavuika from, of course, Shillinen's Constellation. As correctly pointed out, I'm not going to be getting a Pyro Scroll buff on this team, though, which is, of course, why I'm going to be using a Pyro Cup on Mavuika. I actually can get a Pyro Scroll if I want to do the double scroll setup, but apparently the setup time is just long enough that it actually ends up being a DPS loss. My guess is that with all of the DPS damage percent that is coming in already from the other characters, and of course Peak Patrol Song, another 40% just doesn't seem to be worth it. C6 Symphonist Iansan. Iansan famously gives up to 810 flat attack, and I actually can get all of that flat attack. C2 gives another 30% attack buff to the on-fielder, and C6 gives a 25 damage percent buff to the on-fielder. So when Mavuika gets healed by Iansan, well, then there's also the Symphonist buff that kicks in for another 32 attack percent. So unlike what some comments mentioned, it's actually quite a lot of attack coming in for Mavuika. And finally we have Farina. Despite actually resulting in more team DPS if I run a proper DPS build on her, I have opted to stick with the high ER build just so I could use her ult more often in favor of more Mavuika DPS. But I'm specifically not going full support Farina, because that actually resulted in a team DPS loss. As it turns out, by cutting Farina's own DPS in half, the extra attack percent from something like Tenacity just simply won't make up for it on Mavuika, especially when I've already mentioned a whole bunch of attack buffs incoming for her. I did also see someone mention Bennett and Pyro Resonance as being the preferable option to Iansan. Well, here's the comparison of running my C6 Symphonist Iansan versus my C6 Aquila Bennett.
Everybody stand back! Let's
As you can see, we're getting lower attack as a final attack on the Bennett side. Now granted, my Bennett is still level 80 out of level 90, so if I were to go all the way, his own base attack would increase by up to 13, which would make his buff actually increase by an additional 18 attack as a flat attack buff. Problem is, as we can see here, the gap between these two characters with regards to Mavuika's final attack is 32, which famously, did you know, is more than 18. Therefore, just from the narrow viewpoint of Mavuika's final attack, 7 is the outside is actually stronger than Akila Bennett when you have something like R1 Mavuika. Hope this clears up some confusion with the team, because we're just going to go straight into those 3 build variations that I actually tried. The first one is a standard Atk Pyro Crit build. Now this is actually a strong build for teams that don't necessarily rely on reactions, such as Mavuika Overload against things that don't have a permanent Hydro Aura. Even with all the various buffs incoming in that, I would probably use this build anyway, because apparently attack scales linearly. So as long as your build has a lot of crit, going for something like an attack sand can in fact make a lot of sense. But this is a team that has vape reactions, so not having any EM on the build is what's hurting the most. And like I mentioned earlier about balanced builds, by having a team that already has a lot of attack percent buffs, using an attack sand instead of something like an EM sand would result in less DPS overall, especially because with Mavuika, her vapes actually do enough damage to warrant building in favor of them instead of the hits that simply don't vape. Because we're using a vape team to test various builds, swapping out the attack sound for an EM sound of course makes sense. The thing about EM is that after a certain point, any additional EM starts to really lose out on value. Now, I've always thought that that threshold was at the 200 mark, but I've heard folks lay claim to 300 EM. Either way, I'm not bringing someone like Sucrose or C60 or hell, C2 onwards Miko next patch anyway, to give me a whole heap of EM, so we're not going to run into that threshold where additional EM from the sands suddenly isn't as useful as it should be. Instead, what I want you to take a good hard look at are the crit stats of this build. Now first off, I know, I've overcapped on crit rate by around 5%, which for those playing at home is pretty much 2 crit rate rolls. So ideally, I could turn that into a crit damage and attack percent roll on my sand, and we'd have a bit more damage. Now, incidentally, I have a flower that has more crit damage at the detriment of less crit rate, but that seems to result in a slight DPS loss. The second thing I want to have a look at is of course Mavuika's final crit stats in this demonstration. We have 105% crit rate, I know, overcapped, but then we also have 263% crit damage. I think it's because her crit damage, which I'll remind you is also getting increased by the signature passive being so high, that I think we're starting to venture into the territory where additional crit damage is starting to lose out in value. Meanwhile, Mavuika's final attack seems to be sitting at the 4800-ish area compared to the 5300-ish area with an attack sand. And thus we come to the big discovery I made that resulted in the community post, because it turns out that of all the sets to have it on, I somehow have an on-set busted EM hat. So I gave that a try, and I seem to be doing a bit more DPS. Unlike the EM Pyro Crit build that has overcapped the crit rate by 2 rolls, in this build I have almost 100% crit rate after Obsidian kicks in, and one of the greatest memes about this game is that even if your crit rate is at 99.9%, your crit rate still effectively feels like it's actually at 50. But this is a build that I think is taking advantage of the generally linear scaling of attack, the value of EM before the threshold, and I still have some 236% final crit damage. So what I think is happening is that this build is in fact the one with the most balanced stats of all, which may be the reason why I'm doing a bit more DPS.
Incinerate! Incinerate! Incinerate!
There's a couple of things to note. When recording these runs, the team DPS did vary a little wildly, probably because I sometimes messed up the combo, probably because crit memes played into it, so it did take me a few tries with each build to actually get a really good run. The difference between Atk Pyro EM and EM Pyro Crit was only 1.8k DPS, so I did wonder if the aforementioned 2 useless rolls in crit rate being turned into something useful would have made a difference. And it was at that point in writing the script that I realized, oh wait, hang on, I can actually find that out, because you can actually change rolls in the simulacrum. So that's what I did. I took out my 2 crit rate rolls and gave in 2 crit damage rolls. And as a result, I actually reached 171k DPS, which is a game-changing 400 more DPS than what I was getting with Atk Pyro EM. So I guess if my EM Pyro Crit build was more optimized and properly optimized, then it would be ever so slightly better than Atk Pyro EM. All of this to say, it seems to me that if you're running 1000 Blazing Suns, there's a good to fair chance that if by some miracle you have some great EM and attack pieces lying around on the Obsidian Codex set, you should probably consider using those. Because it really does seem to me that they're as good as your crit pieces. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below. How do you feel about your Mavuika? Actually, what are you using on your Mavuika if you do have R1? Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, hope you guys enjoy this. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more Genshin Impact action, and until next time, I will see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Incinerate! Aligning, echoing song! Bring it! Letting brave names echo! Start the clock! Strike a pose! Light of the blazing sun! Burn it down!
Snatch it from my grasp! Take time!
Yoo-hoo! Time to shine! Bring it! Let the magic rain boil! On my mark! Wrath from the sky! Incinerate!
The new world that I've longed for.